Hey everyone, welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. Today is the Quick Change Challenge, hosted by Theresa B DIY and co-hosted by What's Jamie Making and Dave's Wreaths. Links to their channels will be in the description box along with the playlist. So, I thought I'd take you into my workshop and show you a bit more of my process. I've drawn my project onto a piece of MDF and I'll cut it out with my scroll saw. Basically, I just follow my lines, gently pushing the MDF or wood, and the blade does the rest. I know it looks at times as though my fingers are close to the blade, but no worries, they are a safe distance away. See? Easy peasy. The next piece of wood is thicker, so I'll adjust my foot guide to accommodate. Normally, I would change to a thicker blade for thicker wood, but I haven't been able to get them, so I'll make do. I'm cutting two separate pieces here. These are going to be the stands for my project. The saw is very, very noisy, so I removed that audio track so we don't have to listen to it. I do have to be gentler with the thicker wood, so it does take more time to cut it. I don't want my blade to snap. Now there's a little piece there in the center that I'll knock out. When I'm finished cutting, I'll sand everything and then I'll vacuum up the mess. I always vacuum right after I'm done using the saw because the dust gets everywhere. So there you go. There's a little look into how I get things started. So the first part of my Quick Change DIY is a Halloween project. So here's my double-sided piece, which one side will be Halloween and Christmas on the other. I also cut two pieces that will be both the shoes of the characters and their stand. They'll just pop on right here on the front of each guy, and there you go, perfect stand. So the first thing I do is paint my edge with charcoal paint. This will give me a neutral edge that will work for both of the characters. I'm going to paint completely around the edge, trying not to get any paint on either side, but if I do, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I can sort that out later. Whenever I make these characters, I always cut out the features on cardstock, so that if I decide to make another one later, I'll have them on hand for consistency. It's so much easier than starting from scratch each time. So as you can see, I just put them into place and trace them onto my piece. So for this guy, I'm just freehanding the line that will separate his face from his body and his shirt from his pants. This chap here will be Dandy, the pumpkin man. So I'm using Bittersweet orange for his face and his hands. I am careful not to get any paint on my edges, but if I do, I will clean them up later like I mentioned earlier. And everything will get 2 coats of paint, at least 2. I'll use Hippo Gray to base coat his pants, and again, 2 coats. Another thing, whenever I'm base coating, I always try to use the largest brush that will fit in this space, if that makes sense, to cover the most area quickly. I used painter's tape to cover his hands so I can use my check stencil without worrying about jacking up the painted surface below. I'm going to use rain gray and a cosmetic sponge on the stencil. And his shirt gets 2 coats of white. Now that he's completely base coated, I'll work on his sneakers. The top of the sneakers will be charcoal and the soles will be white. I love putting sneakers on my characters. Cracks me up. Okay, on to the details. I'll trace on his facial features and paint them in. His eyes and nose are both charcoal, and his mouth will be white. I add white swirls to his eyes, starting in the center and swirling my brush outward and around. And I add laces to his sneakers. Using Float Medium and Amber Glow, I'll shade his face and his hands. I load my brush with the medium, then scoop the paint onto one corner of my brush, stroking the brush on my plate to get the color gradient, the fade from dark to light. Starting where I want my pumpkin's indent, I'll curve my stroke up, then I'll stroke down to meet it in the middle, and repeat it on the other side. I'll reload my brush and shade the bottom of his face and around his nose, eyes, and mouth. And around the edge of his face too. And of course his hands. I'll follow my Amber Glow shading with Hippo Gray because, you know, I like to build my color. And I just hit all the same areas, painting next to, not on top of, the Amber Glow. I'll use my liner and Hippo to paint in his teeth. I give them a slight curve, and I'll give him some eyebrows too. I'm using Hippo to outline his mouth as well. I'll float some shadow on his teeth to add that vintage vibe, particularly in the corners of his mouth, and that's with Hippo as well. He needs some character lines. Add some lift to his eyes. With Drizzle Gray, I'll shade his shirt and the soles of his sneakers. So, I've probably mentioned this before, but whenever I'm shading, I always hold the paint side of the brush to the area where I want the shadow to be darkest. So you'll see me rotate my brush as I paint. So now I'm adding the shading to the soles of his sneakers, and I'm adding that separation line in between the two shoes. I'm using charcoal to shade his pants, shading around his hands, adding the suggestion of legs by painting a straight line in the center. I'm going to add stripes to his sleeves to jazz them up a bit. I'm alternating my colors, starting with Spiced Pumpkin, then Charcoal, and then Rain. I curve my stroke to follow the shape of his arm, getting longer as I move toward the hand. And I'm going to add some random dots to the checks on his pants, just for fun. I'll dip dot charcoal buttons onto his shirt, and I'll add a dot of spiced pumpkin and a smaller dot of rain gray to pull all the colors together. I'm building on my shading with Hippo, as I always do, because that's how I roll. And I'll shade his sneakers with black. I apologize for all the background noise. Life in a city. If you were wondering why his features were so low on the pumpkin and his forehead so high, it's because I'm making him a hat, which will take up most of his head. I'm going to give him a paper boat hat, like you might see in a real vintage Halloween piece. So I fold my paper in half and in half again, which is really just to mark my center point, and I'll open it up. I want my open edge at the top. So now I'll take that bottom corner and fold it up like this, making a triangle, like a paper plane fold. And then I fold my other side, meeting them in the middle. Then I fold up my flap to align with the edge of the triangles, and then I'll flip up the other side to match. And I'll glue my folds into place. I've cut corrugated cardboard trim to fit across the brim. I'll hot glue it into place. And I'll fold the extra around the back, gluing it into place, matching up the scallops front and back. I'm floating some spiced pumpkin along the edge of my hat to tie in the color. And I'll brush some spiced pumpkin onto the front of the trim too. Using this crepe paper garland, I'll make a schmancy doodad for his hat. And I'll do this by gluing it onto a cardstock circle. I'm using fabric glue, mainly so I don't burn my fingers, but hot glue would work too. I add a swirl of glue to the middle of my circle, and I'll press one end of the garland into it. And I'll add more glue around the circle, wrapping the garland in a swirl pattern, gluing and wrapping until the circle is full. Then I'll clip the excess and glue the end. To embellish it even more, I'll glue this button to the center, and then I'll glue on my 31 to the button. I made the 31 in Photoshop and printed it on cardstock. Now with hot glue, I'll glue it to his hat. The hat slides right on, hiding all his extra forehead. See? Cute, huh? Of course he needs a bow tie of sorts, so I'll layer these lengths of crepe paper, pinch it in the middle, and twist them together with the chenille stem, just like a messy bow. I bring the excess chenille stem to the front and I'll curl the ends around a paintbrush handle. And I cut slits into the bow tie to fringe it. I have this cute 31 button that I'll glue to the center of my bow. And I'll glue the bow tie into place. Oh my stars, so stinking cute. Here's how he'll look when I assemble him, but we have the Christmas side to do. So what are we doing hanging here? Let's get into it. This side will be Christmas Party Santa, and I've already drawn on my details. So we'll start the party by base coating his face with 2 coats of medium flesh. Again, I'm mindful of the edges so the paint doesn't drip, but if it does drip, I'll touch it up when I'm finished. With Pistachio Mint, I'll base his sweater. All supplies and info will be in the description box as always, including the playlist and the link to the host channels, as well as the video on how to make the paper garland. That video happens to be my very first YouTube video. His pants will be 2 coats of watermelon. I like to use watermelon because it has a brightness to it. It has a pinkish cast, but it's still very red. I paint his hot chalk mug spring green. What I'm going for here with Santa is that 50s retro thing. If you look at illustrations from that time, they would use like 4 or 5 colors and everything would be in those particular colors. So that's what I'm hoping to achieve here, even though I'm using a few more colors than 4 or 5. I've always had a thing for that 5 and dime Christmas kitsch, and it's really making a comeback now. His mittens and his sneakers will be Jubilee green. Yeah, giving Santa sneakers too. So I'm using white for his beard, the whipped cream in his hot chalk mug, his sleeves, and the sole of his sneakers. Now I'll start adding the details, starting with a peppermint stick in his hot chalk. It's just a simple stroke the width of the brush. Going to give him some striped pants. I'll start with white and I'll add more as I go. I'm using the cutout of his beard as a guard to protect the painted area as I dry brush some watermelon to his cheeks. I'm using Hippo to fill in his eyes and his mouth. And I'll give him some character lines. His eyebrows are just little white tear shapes. Some stripes for his peppermint stick, watermelon for the red, and Jubilee for the green. I'll stripe his sleeves, alternating watermelon, Jubilee, and spring green. A little ho 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 for Santa's mug. I think I'll add a mint stripe to his pants and an opaque red stripe just along the outside of the white stripe. I'll use this dowel to dip dot his nose with watermelon. This is like the perfect size and gives a really good, perfect circle. Boop. He needs some spring green dots on his sweater. I dot white highlights in the corners of his eyes and on his sweater dots too. And his hot chalk needs some red and green jimmies. A white drop shadow for the ho ho ho, and I'm keeping that shadow to the left of all the lines in the words ho ho ho, if that makes sense. And I'll highlight his nose with a little white stroke and his mittens too. I give his sneakers a stroke of red, why not? Bring that color in there, and he's going to need some laces. Give a little bit of an outline to his mug in Jubilee green, define the handle, shade under the whipped cream. With a small flat brush and Drizzle gray, I'll outline his beard. And give some definition to his mustache and his lip. I feel like the line work really adds to that 50s retro feel. You see a lot of that in the illustrations. And I'm outlining the soles of his sneakers too. A drizzle line under his brow and a quick stroke below his mouth. White highlights on his cheeks. Just a very thin line right across the top of his cheek. And I'll bring some red onto his mittens too with a quick stroke. And adding to that retro cartoon look, I'll outline him with Hippo gray. I'm trying to vary the size of the lines too by starting the line maybe wide at the top and thinning out as it goes down, or the reverse, starting thin and widening. And I can't forget his sneakers. Using my liner brush, I'll outline his facial features. It'll really help them to stand out. And I'll add a bit of contrast to his mug and the dots on his sweater, just by simply doing little lines here and there to highlight. It'll definitely help the whipped cream to stand out against that light green. Makes it look extra fluffy too. And I'll add some along the bottom of his mug and to outline the handle. Santa gets a red and white striped paper party hat, and I'm adding some green lines in there just to bring that color in. And I'll outline in Hippo for consistency. I've made a paper garland for Santa's hat too. I cut a wee bit off to make a pom-pom for the top, and I'll glue the rest along the brim. Let's see how he looks in his hat. Yeah, he's ready for the party. This is what he'll look like when he's completely assembled. Loving him. Digging his retro vibe. As always, I'll spray both sides of my characters and their sneakers with clear matte sealer. I'll glue Dandy's sneakers on with wood glue and a couple of dots of hot glue. The most important thing here is to make sure that the edge of his feet are lined up with the bottom of the edge of his pants, because the feet are what will keep him standing up. And I'll add Santa's feet in the exact same way. You do want to make sure that you're on a level surface when attaching the feet. And there's our man Dandy. He's all ready for the Halloween party. Looking sharp, my man. Please subscribe. Tick the bell icon for future notifications of upcoming videos. A thumbs up would really help me get seen on YouTube. And for more really inspirational and creative projects, please be sure to check out the playlist and the host and co-host channels. Theresa B is awesome for hosting this. Thanks so much. Thanks to the co-hosts, Jamie and husband over at What's Jamie Making, and Dave at Dave's Wreaths and Things. Links to their channels as well as the playlist will be listed in the description box. And there he is, Retro Santa, looking very jolly, enjoying that hot choc. I think these guys would look so cute in a front window, and that's probably what I'll wind up doing with them. I hope you had as much fun watching as I did making these guys. I'm really pleased with the way they turned out and can't wait to decorate with them. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.